Hi, today we're going to be looking at some more issues related to supply and demand. More specifically, we'll be looking at a concept known as elasticity, and we'll look at what happens to equilibrium price and quantity when the government or some other organization gets in the way of the market reaching its equilibrium. That is, when the government sets what's called a price ceiling or a price floor. So first we'll start with this idea of elasticity. And when you look at these two rubber bands, one is definitely stretchier than the other. The one on the left is basically a silicone wristband, and that will stretch a little bit, but it takes a lot of effort to get it to move even a little bit. Whereas the band on the right is your traditional rubber band. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort or energy to be able to stretch that significant distances. And so we would say that the band on the left is inelastic, and the band on the right is elastic, based on the amount of effort it takes to make it to change its shape. Similarly, in economics, we have this concept of elasticity. In this case, what we're looking at is how much does demand change with a change in the price, or how much does the quantity demanded change with a change in price. If the quantity that we demand changes very little with a change in price, we would say that demand is inelastic. And if the quantity demanded changes by a very large number with a small change in price, then we would say it's highly elastic. It's very responsive to a change in the price. So in this case, if we look at this demand curve, we can see that it is very, very inelastic. It has a very steep slope. It is almost exactly vertical. And what it's saying is that if we were to change our price from this price and increase it to this higher price, then the change in price is very significant. But if we look at the quantity of demanded, that change is very small. So we can see that demand does not respond very much to a change in price. When it comes to identifying whether a demand curve is inelastic or not, basically you're looking to see if the demand curve makes a shape like an eye. If it's vertical like the eye, then it's inelastic. The alternative is what we call elastic. In an elastic demand curve, we see that there is a very big change in quantity demanded with a change in price. So here, if we go from the lower price to the higher price, there's a very small change in the price of the good, but a very large change in the quantity. So when the demand is very responsive to price, we say it's elastic. And the way to remember that it's elastic is that when the demand curve is horizontal, it is perfectly elastic. It begins to look like the arm of the letter E. So that's the way to remember it when you look at a graph. The next thing we want to talk about is the effect that price ceilings and price floors have on equilibrium. That is, what is the effect of the government saying you can charge a price of X dollars and no higher, or X dollars and no lower, and what does that do to our market? So we start by looking at a country like Venezuela, where there are very, very long lines for even the most basic of items at a grocery store, and yet when you go through the grocery store, there are very, very few, if any, products for people to buy. And the question is why? Because they're sitting on lots of natural resources. They're an incredibly have the potential to be an incredibly wealthy country. They were an incredibly wealthy country, and yet now they're not. The question is why, and the answer in part lies in the fact that they have price ceilings on their goods. The purpose of a price ceiling is to prevent the market from getting to equilibrium, setting a price below the equilibrium point so that the price doesn't get, in the eyes of the government, too high. So in this case, we might say in the market for apartments that the equilibrium price is $600, but maybe the government says $600 is way too high to charge somebody for an apartment. Most people can't afford that, or the people we want to live in the city can't afford that, or we just feel like it's immoral to charge $600. And so the government decides that let's set the limit at $400. They're basically saying, yes, the price wants to go up to equilibrium, but we're going to put a ceiling here that stops it from getting any higher. And when they do that, it has consequences for the market. The biggest consequence is that it will reduce the amount of apartments that are able to be rented. So normally under equilibrium we charge $600 and there would be 50,000 apartments available for rent. But now, because we've set a price ceiling of 400, we find that the quantity of apartments that are being made available for rental has fallen to 30,000, and at the same time, because the price is lower, more and more people want an apartment, and so the quantity demanded is now 90,000. There's a difference now between what is demanded and what is available, and this difference, we said earlier, is a shortage. There's not enough to go around. There are more people looking for apartments than apartments that are available. And so we have this shortage situation in which we have fewer people living in apartments than before. Those who get an apartment are better off because they're saving $200 a month in rent, but there are now more people out of housing than there were previously, because when their price was $600, there were 50,000 apartments. Now there are only 30,000 apartments available, so we basically have taken 20,000 people and put them on the streets. There are some other consequences to a price ceiling you should be familiar with, other than shortages. One is that it lowers the quality of the good. The way to think of it is this: businesses will offer a good where the quality matches the price. So in the case of the apartments, if the landlord can only sell you a $400 apartment, then you're going to get an apartment that's worth $400. There's no reason or incentive for the landlord to make the apartment nice or to provide upgrades, because there are more people looking for homes than there are homes available. So if you don't want to live in their apartment, there's at least 3 or 4 other people who will. And so the general quality of the good begins to diminish when you put a limit on what you can charge. It also creates a waste of resources, because you now have, in our example, 60,000 people trying to find an apartment. Most people looking for an apartment won't get one. So when an apartment does become available, you're going to have lots and lots of people drop everything that they're doing at work and dash to the apartment to try and be the very first person to make it. That person will lease the apartment. Everyone else is left without one. And not only are they left without an apartment, but now they're not doing their work. The other control the governments will often use is what's called a price floor. That is, the government says that the price that the market wants to charge is too low. We want to prevent the market from getting to that lower price because it's unhelpful for some public policy reason. So in this example, we look at the market for bushels of corn. The market normally wants to go to $5 a bushel, but the government may say $6 is the lowest we can go. Any lower than that, and farmers can't survive, or it's not fair to farmers. So they set this price so that it prevents the market from getting to where it wants to go. Just like the floor on the second floor of a building prevents you from being dragged down by gravity to the next floor below you. So when they set this price floor, it also has implications for the market. In this case, with a $6 price floor, there is more being offered for sale than there is demand. There are only 8,000 bushels that people want to buy, but there are 12,000 bushels being produced by farmers. So now what we have is a surplus. There's too much stuff. Not only is there too much stuff, but when there was no price floor, the market had us selling $5 a bushel for corn, and we were selling 10,000 bushels. Now there's only 8,000 available. Why 8,000? Because you cannot sell what people don't want to buy. So while there are more than 8,000 bushels out there in the market, demanders only want 8 of them. And so there will be a lot of corn left over. So we have higher prices for products and fewer products being sold when we set the price floor. Again, for those farmers who can sell their products, this is great. They're making more money than before. But for those farmers who can no longer sell their product because people don't want to pay $6, they're left out in the cold. Another consequence is that we start making the products too nice. So similar to the price ceiling, in this case, and we have product left over. There are, in this case, 4,000 bushels of corn that haven't been sold. So what do I do to sell products when I can't lower the price? Because that's the whole purpose of the price floor. The farmers cannot charge less than 6. If they do, they go to jail. So what do I do if I have products and you have products that no one wants? And the answer is we start making it look nicer. We start spending money and time and resources making the ears of corn bigger or sweeter or something like that. but it's nicer than it needed to be, because without the price floor, we would have been happily selling 10,000 bushels of corn with the quality we had had previously. So again, the price is equal to the value of the product. So if I'm going to charge you $6 for a bushel of corn, it's going to be a $6 bushel of corn. And if it's not of that high enough quality, then no one's going to buy it. And so we see this trend towards unnecessarily nice products. And again, there's also wasted resources, because now we've got all this food in this example that no one's going to buy and no one's going to eat, and it's going to rot and be a waste. In class, you're going to get an opportunity to practice some of these concepts with some practice problems, and we'll make sure that you understand them prior to our test next class.